Hey guys, Kinggath here with another episode of the Kinggath podcast. I really am struggling with my words today. Well, hopefully that won't go through the whole episode. But today's guest is somebody I have admired for quite a while in the modding community. He is a wonderful weapons modder, and he recently put out a fantastic tutorial set that I actually tweeted out because I was so excited about it, about how you can build weapons from beginning to end in Fallout 4. Welcome, the Rizzler.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
Well, aside from all my choking, I'm doing pretty damn good.
I'll tell you, the amount of times I had to edit out myself, clearing my throat, like, and coughing and stuff in the tutorial. It was almost longer than actually recording it in the first place.
Oh, I know. Some of the video editing and retakes, I tend to, so I've tried both methods with not only my tutorials, but all the videos I do of writing myself a script and just kind of freeballing it. And I find that no matter what, I end up having to re-record a bunch of times just because I'll start going through it and I'm like, wow, that was like, I'm a terrible writer. That doesn't sound natural at all. And then I'll just keep retaking it. And then on top of, not to mention all of the mistakes and everything.
Yeah. Well, I might surprise you then that I didn't actually write a script for the tutorial. Well, I wrote some bullet points, but I just sort of went into it and sort of, because when you're doing something so long, I think I counted it. I didn't realize how long it was actually going to be. I end up being, but I think it is over 12 hours. I sort of, added up all the time codes and ended up being that length. And it's like you just can't plan for something that long. It would take so long to script. Like if I did a section on UV mapping, I can't say. I'd have to imagine, okay, so I've got the UV editor open and I'm grabbing this island and I move it here, and then I say, make sure you leave enough padding between your islands. You just can't do that. So
no, I think when you're doing demonstrations like that, I don't think it makes sense to do it unless maybe something that's less artistic. Like I tend to write out, like for example, the builder's toolkit I did for some settlements, which details how you build each of the things for some settlements. I just came up with like simplistic examples, and I don't explain the parts that involve, like moving the mouse around and stuff. Yeah. It's only the actual technical steps, and then it's like, it'll just get to it and be like, all right, now build a building for yourself. Don't skip all that other stuff. And I think that's...
Yeah, it's true. It's exactly what I had in mind as well. It's like the old saying, you teach a man to fish, You don't get the fish for him. You kind of have to sort of leave him to it and kind of have himself figure it out. So with overall with the tutorial, I kind of had that in mind from the start. Was I don't want people to sort of copy every single step that I do. Click this button, move this here. I wanted to speak on more of an abstract way, like don't make these mistakes. Make sure you keep this in mind. That kind of thing.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
It's still covered some of the sort of UI and the shortcuts that I use, just so it's not completely impenetrable. But hopefully people, create their own
just watching
thing based on it.
Watching you do it with a specific example helps for reference points. It's just like, at least they have somewhere to fall back to. Because I think that's with the tutorials, there's two traps you can fall into. One is you go too far above their heads, and then they have no idea what you're talking about, and then they'll just stop because it's like, all right, well, I can't get past this point. And then the other side of it is you go too detailed, and then they aren't capable of like breaking free from what you've shown them.
Yeah. And they have to keep pausing and rewinding the video, and they sort of lose the flow, and not ideal.
So I have not finished watching all of yours because I just don't have enough time to do a weapon right now. But
that's fair enough. I mean, it is longer than most, director's cut extended movie trilogies.
I think it
the sheer length.
I think it needed to be though. Like weapons are there's so much depth involved in them.
Yeah, because I wrote out the summary. I was like, right, it'll be modeling, UVing, texturing, implementation, boom, done. And that was like 4 or 5 parts. It ended up being 16.
Right.
So it's like,
just implementation alone is quite a task because there's so many moving parts in the CK. Like, I mean, you've got the different pieces of the weapon, you've got the animations, you've got the projectiles, potentially explosions, the ammo records, the construction records, planting it in the world. Like, there's so many steps that go into it, and you almost touch everything, almost every aspect of the CK, aside from, I mean, you could probably get away without a quest, although I bet you do use them because you like to plant your stuff in the game.
Yeah, I use them just for level list injection. Yeah, but I've been, sort of having dreams of maybe looking more into scripting and doing something more, elaborate.
Sure.
Yeah, with characters and that kind of thing.
Oh, like a full blown little quest to earn access to some of your stuff. Yeah,
potentially. Yeah. Yeah, maybe you pick up an object and something triggers, or just really basic stuff that I'd like to do. Because for the Gyrojet mod, which I'm working on, I did make a sort of small cell, like a basement. A cell is it's like a piece of the world, like an interior, or for anyone listening who isn't familiar with the terminology. But I basically built like a small area, and that was the first time I did it, and I quite enjoyed it. So it's like all the different facets, all the different aspects of modding. It's kind of like if you can just dip your finger into it just a little, it can really enhance, your mod in general.
Yeah,
because like you say, there's just so many aspects of it. Yeah, I didn't even cover them all. I mean, today I was trying to find an alchemy record, because that's what it's called, isn't it? The creation kit is like, I was trying to find a usable item, which is, if you search for it in the console, is an alchemy item, but in creation kit it's under the potions, potions submenu. Even though we're working in Fallout, it's under the potions submenu. So it's just one of the little things. There's just so many aspects.
Yeah, and those little things, I think those little things derail a lot of new potential modders of just...
Yeah.
And that's where those detailed tutorials can help out to get people past those initial kind of nuisances, because it's something that's so simple. It's like, I just want to find the damn Nuka-Cola, like stuff like that. Or I had it happen yesterday. So I too have... been wanting to get into the quest stuff, and I had done a few like small quests in part of the plots for the Industrial Revolution expansion for some settlements, but I never got into, I barely did any like character work. Like there was one little scene where you interact with a scientist, and that's about it. But then when we did Conqueror, I got way into it, and it is so much fun. But it's also so damn complex. There's so many layers to it. Like you got to control where the people are looking, what they're saying, the animations they're playing while they're talking. It's like there's just so many layers to this. It's a miracle that any games get made.
I've not even looked into that side of things. Sort of. I think they're called scenes, aren't they? Yeah. Like when you have a group of people talking together. I've not even looked into that, so I've no idea how difficult it actually is. I've got one friend who does. He's called Guy Cool. He does companions. Yeah. He released Ellen the Cartographer. Oh yeah. But I've seen a bit of his sort of development. He posted pictures and stuff every now and then, but the level of detail you have to go into for, I think, affinity as well, how much a character likes you, and just all the different aspects of all the voice lines and all the options that you have, and just insane. Okay, the companions. Yeah, companions are a scary thing. Like looking at the amount of work that people put into those, especially like Alan, like Goy Cools, and like Llamas, like the Heather, like the depth they put into those. It's so much work. It's definitely like a sort of one man modder kind of thing. Yeah, where you need to know so many different sort of aspects. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that last leg, that implementation, is really, really difficult. I think one of the things that's unfortunate is both companions and weapons, I think, suffer from the same thing, is that on the pitch level they seem really small. It's just it's just like, oh, it's just one weapon, or oh, it's just one companion. I already have like a dozen companions. But in reality, the amount of work, like I bet some of the weapons you've done, you've got more hours than I do into big chunks of the stuff I've released, and like mine's complex coding, but it doesn't, I know I'm really fast at coding. It's not a big problem, but just the amount of little nuances you've got to deal with to get your weapons looking and feeling seamless in the game. Yeah, potentially. Yeah. I mean, as I took up animation, that added yet another, I'd say, 20-30% of effort into one weapon. Right. Yeah. It's a lot. You have to cover all kinds of different sort of first person, different sort of movements, like running, sprinting, reloading, equipping, unequipping, and they all have to sort of be cohesive into the same sort of quality level. Yeah, animation just as a whole really does add on to the development effort a lot.
Oh, for sure. But the polish, though, man, it just changes it. Like there's a lot of weapons, that kind of force themselves to work with some of the vanilla animations, and they always just seem a little off or just like a little forced in certain areas. And so when you take the time to do the custom animations, I know it's very appreciated. Yours was your set of weapon mods were one of the first. So like I usually avoided weapon mods because I just find them, again, it's like such a small thing. It's like, there's already, what are there, like 15 different weapon types in the base game. And then you've got all these mods. I'm like, I never use all those anyway. So like, what do I need more weapon mods for? And then I'm like, screw it. We'll start giving some of them a try. And I started playing around with the layer. Is that how you say that? Layer?
Yeah, the layer. Yeah. People always say it layer sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Layer, Shakespeare.
We just really want it to be EAR. But the quality in that is so freaking nuts. Like I couldn't tell that it wasn't from Bethesda. And so I'm just like, I'm just gonna install all of his weapons. Like they're all gonna be. I'm sure they're all gonna be solid. And then I started dabbling into other people's as people have been recommending them to me, and it's really astonishing the lengths some of you have gone to get the quality level in there.
Yeah, I mean, the weapon as an item in games is sort of on the screen pretty much all times. I mean, Fallout is a first person shooter. It's in the name, isn't it? It's a shooter. You've got the gun, you've got it in your face at all times. So you want it to look nice. You're using it to interact with characters most of the time.
Right.
Most of the time you're talking, and the rest of the time you're shooting. So it's like it's kind of two halves to the RPG experience. But I think guns are if you look at it just from an outside perspective, like in terms of the world, then guns are quite small, in characters' hands, and they don't play a big part. But in terms of the actual player perspective, then they're right there, bang on the screen at all times. And I mean, when people play the game for so long, they kind of get used to how certain weapons work. Like I could just, the certain sounds in the game are so memorable to me, and animations as well. So I think one of my unfortunately least favorite animations is the double-barreled shotgun vanilla animation. It has something about it. It's just too stiff to me. So when I see mods using it, it's like, I wouldn't be able to use this weapon no matter how good it looks, because the movement is just off, which is a shame. But I think in general the animations for Fallout 4 are pretty good.
I think somebody didn't War Daddy or somebody put out new animations for the double barrel. Or are you talking about the combat shotgun?
Oh, the double barrel, the vanilla double barrel. There's quite a lot of people who've done sort of reanimations of base weapons, which is pretty cool, because then they actually apply to other weapons that, interestingly, have used the same weapon as a base.
Right.
So, if another weapon mod has used the double barrel shotgun as its animation base, then just by overwriting the vanilla animations, you then get improved animations for that weapon as well, which,
that's
pretty cool.
Yeah, I love the how modular everything is in the creation engine. It's really cool to see just different mods interacting with each other automatically. It feels,
what did Todd say?
So good.
A fully dynamic game engine.
Yeah,
he was right. At E3 when he was placing the door here.
Oh, right. Well, that's why we have such a buggy game too, though. Like you make every system dynamic, it's inevitably going to crash into itself.
What people don't realize is the level, well, probably some people realize because I see it quite a lot in conversations nowadays, but the level of interactivity in Fallout is unbelievable. All the different small moving miscellaneous objects, and the different factions, and I don't think people really realize just how many moving parts there actually are, in the game. And it's just like, other games you might walk up to a door and hit E, and you can open and close the door. In this game, you can move the door. I'm not explaining it very well. I'm making it sound very simple, but I think you get the gist. It's just so detailed, such a detailed world. Really does kind of tax the system. And yeah, you do run into these small sort of clogged cogs. Well, I really can't get the right metaphors today.
I think people get upset about the bugs because it's so easy to get lost in these worlds. And I think one of the things I've noticed with people who play with mods, just from introspection, is we all want to get the game to a point where we can play it forever. Like, I think secretly that's our goal, is like, can we make Skyrim or can we make Fallout? Can we make the game so long and so deep that we never have to finish? And when you get into that, what's that?
Sorry, it's also like, installing mods and everything, it's entirely to your tastes, isn't it?
Sure, yeah.
Because creators create things to their taste. At least I create weapons that I want to use, or that fill a niche in the game which I noticed, and then, other people, maybe it fits someone else's taste. So not only do people want to mod the game until they're, to last forever, but also, I'd say, to make it their own, because that's the nature of Fallout, isn't it? And Bethesda's RPGs in general is, you don't go in with a predefined character. You have the freedom to create your own.
Right, and then all the mods allow you to even get the gameplay elements that would match the way you want your character to live out their lives. But I think what I was trying to get at there was that when those bugs start coming up and cause save corruptions or showstoppers like that, I think it upsets us more and like why there's such a vocal thing and such a meme about how buggy Bethesda games are. I think the reason everybody shouts against that so much is because we're trying to bury ourselves in this game world, and then those things pull us out. Or in the case of like those save corruptions, it's like, you just caused me to waste how many hundreds of hours. So like I think there's even though we can explain it away and be like, okay, there's when you have a game this dynamic, there's inevitably going to be issues when you're crashing the systems into each other, but that doesn't ease the pain when something like that happens.
But yeah, I think it's an acceptable side effect of just how moddable and open the game is.
I agree. 100%.
I mean, I think you'll agree, it's just so much fun to mod for Fallout.
I mean, it's hard. Once I got into modding Fallout 4, it's been hard for me to play again. Like, I just am like so addicted to like making new systems and experimenting with all the toys that are available. Yeah.
Because if you see the game day in, day out, and you're working on your mod and everything, then you get used to the look of everything, and you kind of don't want to play it for leisure anymore, because it is kind of your job in a weird way, but not like an actual job, like like a sort of like a hobby.
I mean, it's like it feels like dream job. It's like, oh, if money didn't, if everyone just paid everyone to do whatever their passion was, this would be what I was doing all the time.
I would love to do weapon mods forever. Yeah.
That gyro chat? So you and I used to chat a lot in the Nexus Discord when I first came onto the scene. Yeah, and you'd been working on the gyro jet back then, because I remember you and Vicky were trying to figure out a good script to make the little things explode properly.
Yeah. I think it was also the distance damage as well was an aspect, because gyro jet weapons in real life, the actual gyro is a kind of bullet that is self-propelled via fuel. So instead of the classic bullet, which has a sort of built-in propellant, like a charge, which launches it down a rifle barrel, a gyro jet instead kind of starts accelerating. The fuse is triggered. It starts accelerating down the barrel and kind of leaves it, and self-stabilizes itself in flight, which is where the gyroscopic name comes from, because it stabilizes itself gyroscopically. But yeah, I'm getting really off tangent. You can see why I'm a weapon modder. I completely forgot what we were initially talking about. But
just talking about the gyrojet in general, because you've been working on it for a long time. Like probably, I think you must have started like a year and a half ago.
Yeah. I think I started it immediately after the Magnum rifle, which was really long ago. I think we can talk about that in a second. But the gyro, the distance. Hilariously enough, we actually figured out the distance damage thing quite recently, with just a really simple rejiggling of the range the way range is calculated in the game.
Okay.
So usually when you fire a weapon, it has a certain range. For shotguns, it's very low. And for other weapons like rifles, it's higher. And you put a longer barrel on, and it increases the range. And what range does is when you're hitting something which is beyond the weapon's ideal range, you get damage drop-off. All we did is turn that damage drop-off, which is usually 0.5, into a positive number, like 1.5. And then what happens is when the bullet hits something out of range, it actually boosts the damage.
Oh, interesting.
which is an aspect of what I was trying to describe before with the gyrojets, in that the round accelerates and keeps accelerating as it leaves the barrel. So with a bullet, with a bullet, it leaves the barrel at its highest speed and then sort of loses speed as it goes and then hits the target. Whereas gyrojets, they start and then slowly accelerate. Well, not slowly, it's quite fast. But it accelerates quite fast and then just keeps accelerating until it runs out of fuel, and then begins to slow down. So it's a completely different kind of sort of ballistic behavior, which, we wanted to try and replicate. So is
the niche for that weapon going to be to encourage players to try and take those crazy, unrealistic shots? For the one shot.
So the bullets are exactly. The bullets are basically repurposed missiles. So we took the vanilla missile and like shrunk it down, changed the mesh, and made it spin, but also drop in the air. So the base game missiles, they don't actually drop whatsoever, but the actual gyrojet rounds do. You can just add a simple sort of there's a gravity entry in the projectile entry, and all we did was just whack a value in that, and then you've instantly got bullet drop. I think there's another mod called Weapons of Fate which does something similar. It kind of physicalizes all the bullets, like in another game like Battlefield. So that's essentially what we did. So you can try for the really long snipes with the bullet drops, and it's for the most skillful of snipers. But also we've got kind of elemental ammo, so you can have high explosive and sort of we've got nuclear rounds, but we called them mini nuke rounds instead of. So you got the nukes, the mini nukes, and then the mini nuke rounds, which are even smaller. I don't know, maybe only I laugh at that joke, but if it's funny to me, then it's good enough.
That's good enough to go in.
But no, we've been working on that one for a while. The main roadblock was the animations.
No, you're saying do you have somebody you partner up with on these?
I'm working with a guy called Wanamingo right now.
Oh, okay.
Vicky Oros has unfortunately left the modding scene.
Sure.
Right now.
But
I'll still be using.
Everybody's got to take breaks once in a while, I think.
Yeah. He's contributed a few scripts that to the project, so he's happy with me using them.
Awesome.
But it's been a long time coming, and I kind of just want to finish it up now and get it out. That's another thing, isn't it, with these mod projects? You don't really want them to sit too long, do you? And because it doesn't matter how much you love doing something, if you're doing it day in and day out, it's gonna start getting more and more stale. Which is, I guess, kind of why the Hunting Revolver came out so fast, because I was driven. I knew that the tutorial was going to be really hard, so I was like, right, I really better do this properly, and just kind of tricked myself into thinking this thing is so insanely hard that I can't do anything other than put 100% into it. And I got it finished in, I think, 2 or 3 months. So it just shows the difference between just initially starting out with modding and kind of getting a bit stuck on stuff versus being more used to it and kind of setting out to really get something done and knowing that there's the kind of the weight there.
Well, I think that gives people some perspective of just how complex weapon mods are. Like, you consider 2 or 3 months to be a quick turnaround. That's got to be very shocking for people to hear. And that's the amount of detail level that goes into these, which is why I think it's still shocking to me that Bethesda can pull off these giant games in 3 years. No doubt. That to me seems unrealistic because I know how much time it goes into. I mean, and a lot of times I will estimate out things, and my team is very aware of my inability to estimate these things out. But I'll be like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can have that system up and running in a week, and then it's like a month later, like, what is going on here? Why isn't this done yet?
Yeah, for sure. They do say that whenever you make an estimation based on how long it'll take something to get done, add 50%.
Oh, I'm finding that's I'm finding that's not accurate at all in modding. And I mean, if it's something I know well in modding, like if I'm just doing a repeat of something, like I know how long it takes me to make like a building for some settlements. But anytime I'm stepping into new territory, it's so hard to judge, just because there are random things you can run into in the creation kit when you don't know one little bit, and like it'll just get you stuck for like all of a sudden you've dumped 15 hours into solving one little tiny like nuisancey problem that you probably could have just ignored. But I think looking at the quality of your stuff, you do the same as I do, which is you just basically bash your head against it until you solve it.
Yeah. Again, coming back to the whole multifaceted part of making mods, there's so many little things that just seem, like giant walls when you're first getting started. And it really is, one of the most difficult things. I remember back when I was doing the Magnum rifle and I was trying to figure out third-person animation, which was a huge deal. Well, after we actually figured out custom animation initially, so we could get, custom first-person animation. But the next step was third-person animation. And that was just weeks of, no real progress. Just trying different keywords, trying different paths. It was mainly subgraphs, and that is kind of a trigger word for a lot of people, I think, in the animation department, the animation modders, because subgraphs is essentially what dictates what animations play when, for example, which of your limbs have been damaged, or and so to put it into perspective, there's one subgraph entry for first person, and that controls everything because the animations don't change if you're injured. Whereas for third person, it's something like 20, 30 other entries for, like, if you have your left arm damaged and your right arm injured, or you have your right arm injured and your right leg damaged. I can't even say it now. It's like unbelievable. But so that was another big thing to get through. And I think it was actually the generating of the metadata, which was posted on the wiki by, I think, a Bethesda developer a long time ago now. But that actually opened the floodgates, and because otherwise it just wouldn't have worked.
Right.
But it was the posting of that information which obviously unlocked the door, and we were finally able to, I hazard to say, but I think I might have been the first to do third-person animation with the Magnum rifle.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And it always was odd to me that people were all obsessed with third-person animation, and then it clicked. It was like, oh, because the enemies. Like, even if... Because I was like, who the hell plays this game in third person? And I know there are some people who play it in third person, but that has to be the minority of players. But then I was like, oh, yeah, if you want your enemies to use these weapons, it's going to look real stupid if they don't have an animation.
But it is a meme in the modding circles that I'm in, that who uses third person to aim, because it has to be said in Fallout 4 it's much easier to aim in first than it is in third.
But
also VATS,
right,
VATS,
you get to watch your player.
Boom, you're in third person. It's
true.
Just as important, I think. So even if you're a staunch first person player,
right,
you still have to see a character every once in a while, unless you use VAFs or something. The bullet time mod.
But I think VATS is pretty key to Fallout. Yeah, that's another thing. I guess this is part of why I just wasn't in the weapon mod mode, so I never even noticed the problem. But it does make sense now why people get all excited about it. And to your point, that it's a very good one, is that even though it seems like a small item in the game world, it is like it's your arm in the game. Like, it's your interaction. It's your primary method of interaction besides the X button. Like it's you're either putting a bullet in somebody, or you're F to pay respects. Like, there's only the two options there.
Maybe not that simple, but that's essentially how it is.
So I have a newfound respect for weapon mods, especially looking into the amount of time that goes into them. But the animation system, to me, is another one of those ones where it's mad props to Bethesda for making a system that's that dynamic and that can be injected into. So that system, when I know part of it, like you said, we needed the specific piece of data about that extra data you could generate, and before having those console commands or the bat commands to do that from the exe, it was literally impossible for us to pull it off. But then the next stage of it was understanding how the subgraphs work, and to me, once I looked into that, because I've done a few animations for, not that I didn't do the animation, like I implemented animations for people. That system made so much sense to me as a software engineer. I was like, oh, this is clearly like you can see the programming all over this. Like it's structured exactly like how you'd expect something like this to be from a coder's perspective. So I can see why it's probably animator or artists in general working when you're modding. You end up having to learn to think probably way differently than you do when you're doing art, because I think it uses a totally different part of your brain to create the artistic side versus like figuring out these mechanics. And I can always feel it because I do a little bit of both. I'm definitely not an artist at your level in any way, but I do some design work. And when I'm doing design work, I can like listen to a podcast in the background or like have television going. If I'm like coding, I have to be like 100% of my concentration has to be on that. And a lot of the CK stuff to me tends to be in that side of things of like doing animation graphs and stuff. Like if I were trying to rig all that up with only part of my attention, I would fall apart. Like,
that's interesting because for me, I actually listen to music pretty much 99% of the time.
And I can do music, but that's because that doesn't require any concentration. But if I'm trying to pick up words from people, so like if I'm trying to catch up on Game of Thrones, I can't do that while I'm coding. Like this is never going to happen. I will inevitably just start typing sentences about Jon Snow instead of the code I'm supposed to be writing.
If I was doing some writing, then I definitely couldn't listen to anything with lyrics. I've noticed that sometimes I can only listen to music without lyrics if I was doing some writing. But I use music a lot to kind of get into what's called the flow, which is where you just all space and time kind of just stretches away, and you're just focused on the work. And whether it's modeling or texturing, probably texturing's the easiest one to kind of get in a flow with. But it's that kind of effect which music actually helps.
My wife hates that I get into the flow so often because I have it's a joke around my house about how bad I am with time because it's so easy for me to get into a flow when I'm coding. It'll just be like I'll sit down and be like, I need 10 minutes, and then I'll get a phone call from her upstairs like, hey, it's been 2 hours. I'm like, no, like that's not possible.
What? Wow. I imagine I'd probably be like that.
So you've got the gyro coming then? I assume it's after a long time in development, because I think you had most of the model done. I assume it was since then it's been the code problems and the animations, obviously, because at the time you weren't really doing a ton of animation back then when I first saw it.
I think I've retextured it 3 times.
Now is that for different skins or just for like the initial?
Oh, just the base texture.
Oh wow.
I think in the past I have struggled a bit with texturing for Fallout 4.
In what way?
Oh, just the sort of the kind of smooth spec, I think it's called, rendering system.
Okay.
With the cube maps and everything. I'm really a kind of, this is getting into really artistic terms, I realize now, but I'm more of a metal rough kind of guy. And bear with me.
I gotcha.
So what metal rough is, you have one map, which is the metalness, and that should be either black or white, with maybe some cheeky grays in there. And black means non-metal, white means metal. So that's simple enough. The roughness map determines how sort of rough or unrough your surface is. So if you were to have like grease or oil on your surface, it'd be blacker. Whereas if you have something rougher, like a raw wood or something, then it'd be whiter because it'd be rougher. So that's the metal rough system. The alternative to that is the specular gloss system, which is the other physically based rendering model, where you have a specular map which controls the strength of the specular response, which is the kind of the highlight on a surface, and then you have the glossiness, which is how diffused. This is so hard. how spread out that highlight is.
It's definitely one of those concepts that's easier to understand when you've got some visuals. Like trying to explain it to people in words is pretty rough.
Yeah. So yes, simply enough, specular is how bright the reflection is. Glossiness is how, let's say, matte or shiny an object can be. Fallout 4's rendering system is none of those. It's a sort of carryover from the previous generation of rendering. And it has a diffuse and a normal, which is completely normal maps. I just said normal again, didn't I, in the sentence? You have the normal map, which controls the lighting on the model, and the diffuse, which is the color, and those are regular. Only artists will get what I'm trying to avoid there, the wording. And then you have specular and the smoothness, and the smoothness is just another word for glossiness. So the closest it is to spec gloss, but you've also got cube maps thrown in, and there are other games which have kind of done similar things. I think Counter-Strike Global Offensive had a sort of dynamic cube map system where if you moved into a different area, the cube map would switch out, and the gun would be kind of lit in a different way. It's that kind of thing. It's entirely understandable given the sort of the constant upgrading and refactoring of Bethesda's engine, that it would have some similarities to a previous rendering rendering system. But I just had difficulties really understanding because I started 3D art, I think, in either 2014 or 2015. It was the second year of university, and I was doing a media course. We were doing all kinds of stuff like websites and apps and things, and then we got to games, and I was like, oh, I like this. So I tried a bit of programming, C#. I tried a bit of bit of animation, a bit of character rigging, level design, all different kinds of little things, and made a little game.
Oh, awesome.
And then I was like, I really like this. So after university, I was like, I need to specialize, because no one in the game industry hires a specialist, do they? If you're looking for a programmer, you go to computer science. If you're looking for an artist, you go to computer arts. What you don't do is, right, I need a games man, and you go to the games course. That's
Although I do see that most game companies do have generalist positions, so I think they like having a handful of rovers that they can be like, you know what, we have this project that kind of blurs the lines. We need you to take that on. Yeah, that's definitely a thing that they need some number of, but I don't think it's the majority. Like the majority, they want to be hyper-focused on one little aspect.
Because there's so many different roles, aren't there? And you want people to be at the absolute peak of their skill. You want
it's generally, I think, what they use, because what like I use generalists for when I'm doing software development is to do like prototyping. Like it's great to have somebody who knows a little bit of everything to be like the forerunner and be like, hey, go, bash something out that will work generally, just do basic art and just keep it real simple just to get it up and running so we can try it out. Like it's good for iteration. It's also good. The generalists are also good for the last mile, for cleaning up some of that stuff, like the little bits of things that got put to do markers on. Yeah, exactly. So there definitely is value to having a few jack of all trades, but you definitely, if you're going that route, you definitely aren't going to be doing like cutting edge things. Like you're not going to, because you need your guys who are the best in the field to doing that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I think at the indie level as well, the sort of the indie developer level, you definitely would see more generalists.
Right, absolutely.
Because they definitely want people with general skills. Because the projects are just smaller scale, aren't they? And if you have someone that can do both art and animation, then great, brilliant. That's one less employee you have to pay.
Right, exactly. So, and you're never gonna be operating at the polish level of the AAA either. So like you don't have to take things quite as far. So you don't need people who can do the bleeding edge of anything.
Unbelievably far. Like I played God of War recently. I finished it recently. I think I started at Christmas, I got it for myself at Christmas, and I've only just recently finished it. And I think they said something along the lines of 50 hours playtime. You know, if you want to just play the story and not do all the other side quests.
That's crazy.
Yeah, unbelievable. And I think it took 5 years to make, or maybe 4 with a year of thinking. But
right.
Yeah, when you get to the AAA level, it's nuts. Just unreal.
And the number of people they have in it. Like, that's the thing. I don't know if I could ever work at that level, just for the fact that I would feel like too much of a number. Like, any particular person could not have contributed any, like, you can't say, like, I did all of that thing. It's going to be like, I did all of that thing for this sector of our world space. Like,
you see that bucket over there?
Yeah.
All me, baby.
But, like, yeah, I think RDR2 had an 8-year development cycle with 400 people. Like, that's nuts. Just
unreal.
Nuts. So I don't know if I ever want to operate in that space personally, but is that something you're looking to get into? Because I mean, it would definitely be cool to have your name on on one of these mega products like that everybody adores. But geez, like I said, that feeling like a number up there scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, I do understand that sentiment. Yeah. I think I started out my professional game experience essentially started out with Creation Club.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, so that was where it all began. Since I'm in the UK, it was obviously remote work.
Sure.
Because I wasn't gonna go over to Washington or anything. It was not the opportunity for that anyway. But that's essentially where it all began. So for since then, it's just been me, effectively.
Okay.
Just working remotely, and I think at this stage, with a couple of years under my belt, because you want it to look good on the CV, don't you? A couple of years under anything, but sorry, Kinggath, I really lost my.
No, that's right. I was just wondering, what is your professional goal? Like, are you hoping to get this? I know you said earlier you would love if you could make weapon mods full time. Are you looking to become just a because that is a thing now? I mean, like you said, weapons are so important to first-person shooters, and first-person shooters are a genre that's never going away. Like, they want specialists in that field for bigger game companies. Would that be a dream job for you to get into, like a company working on, like get into Activision and work specifically on Call of Duty weapons or something in that line?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what I was trying to get at before is I've essentially been working on my own for a while, and I do definitely want to move into more of a creative environment. I've never had a mentor. I've never really had, artistic friends other than online.
Sure.
Even in university, there was no one really heading into games as much as I was. Although I did join the Games Development Society, so I did get I did get a few friends out of that. But that was only for a year or so in third year before I left. But yeah, that's absolutely what I want to move into very soon. Is a really creative environment full of just like-minded people.
Yeah,
and I think it'd be really satisfying to be just part of a bigger project. Yeah, something larger than myself.
Sure.
For once. Just to see what it's like on the the entire other spectrum, because right now I am my own master in a sense. I can sort of choose what I want to do and execute it, but I have to do everything.
right
with the mods. So
there's a couple of it's kind of like you got to choose your poison there, because you have your full control, but you're heavily capped on what you can accomplish. Like you have your time limitations and your own ability limitations, and then like as soon as you get into a team environment, you suddenly expand your reach, which is very awesome.
Absolutely. And I don't think I would mind too much to sort of be a smaller part of a larger thing, purely because I think it'll just give me more perspective.
Sure, absolutely.
And
so you're not. So you don't have dreams of becoming the indie dev extraordinaire or anything?
maybe in a couple more years after that.
Right.
I don't know. You hear so many things about AAA development. There's pros and cons to it.
Yeah.
You get to work with the most talented people in the industry on all the big names of gaming, and on all the most recognizable games, which is exactly what I've done for Creation Club. With Fallout 4, it's been just so unreal to go from just a hobby modder to someone seeing their name in the main menu of the game. Just
that's pretty
clicking
cool. That's
through
feel pretty cool.
Seeing it is just it's not something I do every day.
just when you need a little boost of morale.
yeah, exactly. But it's not like I'm seeking fame or anything. It's just I think it would be really useful.
Sure. Oh yeah, I mean, it's going to look good on your resume. It shows you've got some experience with working with professional developers, because obviously you have to work with people at Bethesda to be a part of that. So you get some experience just working with other people in the industry and have contacts, which is pretty cool.
Exactly.
I just lost my train of thought. Now you're gonna have to carry us while I sort out where my brain was. I'm sitting here staring at some images of, and this is totally going off topic, but just for the sake of not derailing the conversation, I have some images up of the Unreal Editor's shader creation. Have you ever played around with that?
I have, both Unity and Unreal. I've dabbled with,
So those systems look like a nightmare to me. Like just those boxes.
You talk about the spaghetti code.
Yes.
I actually quite like them. Yeah.
Really? What? So because that to me seems to be where we're going for the future of texturing. Is it's going to be less about actual painting on a thing and more about using algorithms to generate it based on realistic materials and setting up the appropriate properties. So then you're not even thinking necessarily in that chrome spec or metalness rough. You're thinking more in the line, how can we simulate this actual material, and how can you tell the computer to generate that? Because to me that seems to be the smarter way to go, especially because then you can apply AI and you can apply software to dynamically alter the materials in real time. Have you moved into that space much as far as getting your head wrapped around it all? Because it looks pretty complicated to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a visual kind of guy, obviously, being an artist.
Sure.
But yeah, these node-based systems actually seem quite useful to me. I mean, there's a program called Substance Designer, which I've been quite a bit of experience, and I've produced a few materials from it, mainly from tutorials. I'm not quite as good at it as a regular texturing yet, but it's the same kind of thing where you kind of have these nodes that set up certain generators and symbols and patterns and all that kind of thing. So say if you're making a paved stone, like a sidewalk full of paved stones, you'd start with a kind of grid generator, and then you'd set up how big the paving stones were, and then you'd maybe have a bit of warping because they've been weathered a bit, and then you put some pebbles, some smaller pebbles in between. You'd probably have a noise generator to generate all the different pebbles, and you can actually create entire textures, entire materials, realistic looking, purely through these different nodes which do different things to the texture. It's kind of like if you were to go into Photoshop, and instead of specifically dragging the brush tool across the canvas or choosing different tools and moving the mouse to do different things, you are instead dragging nodes around saying, okay, do this, and then move this part, and then multiply this part so many times into a grid. So yeah, it's that kind of thing.
It's you're generating art from math, and
exactly.
It's very very cool. I just haven't wrapped my head around it. Textures to me are so damn scary. That's the one. I know how to 3D model. I learned that a long time ago to no value in my life. But every time it got to the point of texturing, I was just I just would fall apart. I just had no concept of it. I'm very bad with colors. I don't understand the concept of it. But this math part of it, these node systems, seem like they should be up my alley. But I'm just so intimidated by textures. Every time I look at it, I'm like, nope, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I mean, it should be, much more approachable to you if you give it a shot. Because I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, going back to the Photoshop analogy, you can go back into sort of your paths through the nodes and kind of change stuff midway as well. So you're not kind of locked in to the stroke that you've made or anything like that.
Right. It's almost like layers. It's almost like layers in Photoshop are your nodes in your texture design. Yeah.
Yeah. It's non-destructive, let's say. You can be non-destructive in art, but it's a very sort of forward moving process.
Right.
Like painting, you have a blank canvas and then you paint on it and then you got the finished painting. You can't go back and say, I wish I changed the underlayer, which isn't necessarily true for Photoshop because, of course you can do that. You've got your layers, but yeah, Substance Designer and the Unreal 4 node editor is down the alley. And yeah, that does remind me of another, just you talking about the future, of art and looking ahead to, can we surpass, all the basic tools that we have now and just reach a stage where, I want this thing to look like this. Have you heard of photogrammetry?
I have not. It sounds really cool though.
Yeah, it's a kind of scanning process where you take a bog standard camera and then you take hundreds of shots of one object from all different angles, and then a computer program kind of maps it out in 3D.
Okay.
And creates the 3D model of all the sort of 3D pixels and creates a really, really, really realistic looking model.
Didn't the original Doom use that for building their models, but like a real simplistic version of it, like way back in the 90s?
I think they made them out of Play-Doh or something, didn't they?
Like I thought they had models and then they took images of them and generated it in 3D somehow.
I think you're right. Yeah. So yeah, it is a kind of
we had to take
the future version of that same technology.
So it's like 20 years ago, Carmack and company were like way ahead of their time.
Photogrammetry, we're inventing it right now. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there was a kind of a big scare, well, at least for me in the art world, when that kind of grew in popularity. Because artists were like, well, what are we supposed to do? We've learned to model, we've learned to texture. What if there's a program that can just take a picture of an object and just instantly transfer it, into a program more lifelike than anything we could do? And it's like, oh, geez. But yeah, there's been games that have come out. I think The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Let me just Google it.
I know what you're talking about. I don't remember the actual name either, but yeah, that sounds right.
That was one of the games which used photogrammetry to really great extent. The whole environment was rendered with that technology. But yeah, I think it is used quite a bit in games nowadays. There's another company called Quixel, Quixel, and they do their own sort of scanning. Mainly for textures, but as well, objects as well, I think. But yeah, photogrammetry is definitely an aspect of current day game development, which has kind of taken the place of traditional texture authoring.
Well, I think I see a lot of, maybe it is Quixel stuff, but there's some company, it's like Mega something or another, Mega Scan. That does like you can just buy packs of like thousands and thousands of textures and models to speed up your development in Unreal. And I think
that's actually owned by Quixel.
Well. Okay, there you go.
So that is Quixel.
that to me seems like, because we're kind of coming to like the end of graphic fidelity. Like it's getting harder and harder for them to make things that look more realistic. Like we're gonna, without getting into the uncanny valley. To the point where then, since we're at that point, it's essentially going to be, a lot of the artwork is going to just be tons of libraries, and then you will just have, most of these game companies will just be able to focus on the picking out and designing a theme within that, and maybe customizing, the core characters and weapon models and stuff, but then using all of the background filler of that, pre-generated and predetermined stuff, because there's no reason to keep reinventing the wheel on that. At some point, you get to a point of near perfection. That's where I see one of the things going with game development, especially if they want to reduce their costs, because the 5 to 8 year development cycle with 400 people is not sustainable if the when you see that the gaming industry is finally starting to hit its peak as far as financial gains, like they're starting to there were like losses in a lot of the major companies last year.
Right. Yeah.
Is that's going to be one of the ways they're going to have to cut costs, and that is probably a danger to artists if they're just going to start using libraries for a large majority of their assets, as opposed to having to generate everything from scratch for every new game.
I think they already do. Yeah, there's a lot of outsourcing in game companies nowadays, where they just sort of they don't have as many in-house, say, environment artists, or rather prop artists, actually, because environment artists do more sort of prop placement and kind of level design nowadays. Sure. But yeah, prop artists aren't quite as common as they used to be, because companies just say, right, we want a sofa and a table, and they talk to their outsourcing people, and they outsource it, and then a 3D house somewhere else in the world just comes back with the props, because they're like, right, we don't want our guys to spend all this time making that, when they could instead be looking at the actual game itself and setting up all the where things need to be, where things need to go, the actual game itself, rather than the art. So yeah, I was originally looking at being an environment artist at the same time as I was dabbling in weapon modding with the Magnum rifle. Actually, I started that before Fallout 4 even came out.
Oh, really?
Man, why are my projects so old? I've updated it since, so it feels fresher than that.
No, so some of your weapons. Wow, I mean, we're gonna jump all over the place, and I love that. That's okay. So sorry, listeners, if we're not staying on topics for you guys. So some of your weapon mods came right out of the Fallout 4 concept art, right? Like the Gyrojet, I think, was one of the concept art. Was the Magnum rifle a unique design, or was that something? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the Magnum and the Gyro were both from Fallout Online concept art done by Caleb Cleveland. But that project was quite a while ago.
Yeah, quite a while ago. That was before Bethesda even picked up the license.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that didn't quite work out. But thankfully, the concepts made it online, and I found it, and I just thought, wow, I'd really love to use these weapons, because they just seem more fantastical than I think the current Fallout 4 vanilla arsenal is. You've got a unbelievably huge anti-personnel rifle, and you've got a weird sort of gyroscope rocket bullet launcher, and you've got a kind of big laser ray thing, and maybe that's doing the current Fallout 4 weapons a disservice, but I just thought, these designs seem so fresh.
I think people enjoy the weapons that are coming out from modders because of that sentiment that the vanilla Fallout 4 weapons were a little stale. I thought the pipe weapons were really awesome. I thought that was a great addition to the universe.
People hate on them so much.
Well, because they're terrible. Like, they're not good to use. But like, from a design concept, like from aesthetically, they're very pleasing to me.
I mean, for the layman, to the pipe guns, they just look at them and just think, wasteland.
Right.
Handicrafted guns. There's wood on them and all that stuff. Unfortunately, they're not entirely realistic.
Right. But just like you said, you want stuff that's more fantastic, and that's kind of like there's definitely a suspension of disbelief that goes into Fallout, and I think that's part of the charm. Like, I think this is why I personally won't play with any of the modern day weapons that get brought into Fallout 4, because I'm like, if I wanted those, I'd go play Call of Duty. Like, I play Fallout because I want to get lost in this like fantasy alternate history game, history in the future.
It's such a fun intellectual property to work with. It's such a fun franchise. Because there's just so many aspects to it. Like, it reminds me of Warhammer, but the original Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
Okay.
They threw in so many different elements. There's elves, beastmen, orcs. They just threw everything and the kitchen sink into the factions that you could get in this game, and it's just like, why not do that? With Fallout, there's robots. It's kind of like Star Wars as well.
Right. Well, I think a lot of the big popular franchises end up having that about them, that they're able to jump between, like Warcraft, another one where like they can kind of do whatever they want. Or now Overwatch, they can do whatever they want. League of Legends, they can do whatever they want. They've got a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of fantasy.
So detailed.
You can kind of throw in whatever you want in it. I am glad they've kind of drawn the line with Fallout in that they tend to avoid mystical.
Right.
Like they try and explain it with some science, even if it's very loose. And I think somebody has said that if you dig into the history of Fallout, there are instances like from the old Obsidian games. There's like one quest where you interact with a ghost or something, and I just pretend that doesn't exist because I don't want all of my, if all of the franchises out there can all do anything. Well, then it's just there's nothing unique about them. You know what I mean? Like it just becomes all blurry. It's just like, well, then it's just who owns it and maybe the general art style, and even that can be pretty flexible between games. Like between
absolutely entries. But you do need to be careful. I just think the whole sort of 50s atom punk aesthetic that Fallout has is just so much fun to work with.
And it's fun to play around in.
And
I personally try not to break it as much as I can. Like whenever we're adding stuff into the game, it's like, all right, let's keep this art style within line, just so it all fits in nicely. And I think your weapons capture that absolutely. Like obviously you base some of them on concept art for previous Fallout games, but then you have to take the extra effort to make sure that your models and your textures actually mesh in well and feel kind of
and there's an additional sort of weapon mods that weren't in the original concept for the Magnum and the Gyro that I've kind of had to imagine, what would a drum magazine look like, for this gun. So I put like a sort of weird squiggly kind of radiator part on the front and like a big cog thing. And it's just thinking about how can you abstract the art style and kind of, create something that doesn't exist before.
Now, where do you go for your inspiration of stuff like that as far as the actual models? Because are you the type that you've got art so embedded into you that you can just imagine it? Or do you go from concept art? Because I know there's people who do it both ways.
Partly.
Okay.
Yeah, I still need a lot of reference. I imagine a lot of artists do, and all good artists should have a really good supply of reference. But I just kind of just really try and channel that 50s feel, and I think funnily enough, as I wasn't too hot at modding back in the Magnum modeling in the Magnum days, my modeling was quite simplistic and bulky. But that really fitted the Fallout aesthetic in that the art style and that everything can be quite oversized and unwieldy. But I do use a lot of reference. But again, just because of the size of the universe and everything, you can really get away with all kinds of different shapes. I had a lot of fun with the Zetan Arsenal for Creation Club. Where, I took the weapons from Mothership Zeta and, had to come up with entirely new modifications for them. And I just had an absolute blast looking for, all different kinds of ray guns and, old 50s kind of alien aesthetic, and was just able to throw all kinds of, wacky shapes in there and just have a lot of fun.
Yeah, those are cool, the Zetan stuff, just because you have to take you almost have to take that 50s absurd look of the future and then take it to the next level, because then you're like, okay, well then if they already had their own crazy ray guns in the 50s sci-fi, then what do the aliens look like? It has to be even more more over the top than that, which is kind of fun.
It needs to feel unfamiliar because of the alien nature. It needs to look kind of a bit creepy, a bit terrifying, but it also needs to be familiar in the 50s sense.
Well, I mean, it's like there's like a double abstraction there, because you're first going 50s sci-fi, but 50s sci-fi looking at the future. And then what does 50s sci-fi looking at the future look at the further future and alien? It's just really, really cool. But the reference thing, so I've heard arguments about this, especially there's been controversies in the comic book world about people who overvalue reference material, and to where their stuff starts to just look like they've drawn photos it looks like they've traced it. Yeah, essentially. And then when you get into things, and this is where that what was that? Photogrammetry. Photogrammetry. I think that's one of the risks in where we get to where we're getting kind of toward that uncanny valley of, as we're trying to get more and more realistic, it eventually gets to a point where it does just make more sense to trace or to copy, because otherwise you're doing a lot of work that a computer could have done to essentially get to the same end result.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's true.
So I wonder at what point does that go where we stop worrying about that? I mean, is it just going to be when I imagine there's going to be a point in art at some point where somebody makes something CGI that is so convincing you can't tell the difference between it and real, and then it's going to be like, okay, well then why are we bothering having somebody put in these thousands of man hours to exhaustingly hand detail this when we could have had a computer do it in minutes? Like, I got to imagine that has to be coming soon.
I think it's the human touch. I think I mean, it goes back to the way computers think about doing things versus humans. So yeah, computers can calculate things in no time whatsoever, whereas humans have a bit more trouble with that. Whereas if you tell a machine to actually draw a tree, they'd have absolutely no idea where to start, because they don't think that their CPU doesn't work the same way that a human brain does. So yeah, but again, that's part of the whole AI kind of thing, that there are probably learning computers out there which are being taught to draw and completely invalidating my point in some way. But yeah, I think the human touch will always be important, and still, even if you're photogrammetizing, I think that's the word, objects, you still need a human to actually place it in the world in a way that makes sense,
right?
So yeah, you always need that kind of human spirit there in order for a game to be relatable for us, in order for art to be relatable. So yeah, you can make your textures ultra realistic, but your game will kind of just look like real life then, which is perhaps why you might want to kind of bring it back into the fantasy realm. I'm trying to think of a recent game which has had really realistic graphics, but
they always pull back from it a little, and I don't know if it's like, I wonder, I'm always been curious, is it that they've in testing, it's like, all right, we can get this up to a realistic look, but there's something about it that just feels so off that you pull away from it. That's kind of that psychological phenomenon with the uncanny valley, is that once we get, even if we can get to a certain level of realism, there's like a rejection of it, and then like it just like you just look at it and it feels wrong. And I'm wondering if we'll get past that, or if it's going to be like we're just going to always have these like slightly off art styles. And I love the off art styles. I don't like, I'm not advocating for like realism, like absolute realism in the game. I'm just curious, at some point, do we get to a point where, for the most part, other than the artists taking all of the stuff that's available out there and combining it in interesting ways, do we ever get to the point where it becomes obsolete, where instead you're better off doing I'm never going to get that damn word right. Use that process to just scan in the real items, as opposed to actually taking the time to manually model them out with tools in the software. Yeah, I think it might be an immersion thing, actually, because if you're in real life and you think, right, I want to play a game now, you sit down, I guess you put your headset on if you want full VR immersion, right?
If the game looks exactly like real life, then it's like, I'm not really escaping to anywhere, am I? So yeah, I think it's definitely a thing where if we ever do reach that stage where it looks ultra real, probably still pull back just to make sure we don't either get lost in it, or we get kind of unnerved and get confused about where we are. This is kind of the premise for a sci-fi movie, isn't it? I swear there's been a sci-fi movie where I know what I'm thinking of, The Matrix, where it's so real. That, I think that's probably, The Matrix is probably inevitable. Maybe not the evil side of the machines using us as heaters, but the idea of having like a simulation that's so realistic you can't tell the difference. I imagine that'll get to that eventually, unless
unless there's some sort of revolt against games and computer simulation at some point, and we tear the whole thing down. But that's getting into a whole nother dystopian sci-fi scenario.
Do you think we're living in a simulation?
I think that's possible. I think that's totally possible. Like, especially, like, imagine that. I actually just had this conversation with somebody recently. So imagine that. All right, let's talk about trying to solve sociological problems. Like, you've got a problem of like, how do we fix depression or something like that? And like, we're like, all right, we want to figure out. Not necessarily, like, we want to get past maybe a drug solution, and we want to come up with like, how do we prevent it in the first place, or something like that. Something that involves humans, or a better example, maybe how do we solve, or how do you best raise children? What's the way to do that? Well, we have this problem that it's very difficult to experiment on actual humans. Like, people don't want to subject themselves to it. People don't want to subject their children to it. But if we had a full realistic simulation, then all of a sudden we could run those experiments. So what if it turned out our reality was like the actual humanity's like experimental run to test out some theories of like, how does this affect humanity? Like, that to me seems like that's something we would actually want to do. And if we could get the computing power to do it, why wouldn't we? Right? Like, you're not actually causing any actual suffering. Go ahead and run your experiments and figure out whether they'd be worth bringing into the real world.
That's what you think, is it? Would it not be immoral? If you could construct
I don't know.
A human consciousness, an entirely realistic human consciousness, and put them through this, this rigor or this pain, purely to benefit the actual real humans, and they're none the wiser.
Right. That's the philosophical argument, right? But then at the same time, could you say, like, how intelligent does something have to be where you feel that? Like, I mean, would you ever get to a point where you feel like the AI in a video game was so realistic that that's like an actual human? Are you going to then not want to shoot them? Like,
yeah. I think there was a game. I think it's called Soma, SOMA, and it did actually explore some of these. It's a horror game.
Oh, okay.
But it kind of explored the whole uploaded consciousness thing.
Okay.
Not AIs, but people could sort of copy their mind into machines. Really, really awesome game. I recommend anyone interested in sort of the whole uploaded consciousness and the kind of philosophical ramifications of the duplicated mind kind of thing to check it out. But yeah, it is a difficult question. I mean, from a practical standpoint, it's a great idea, because you're not hurting anyone real. But from a philosophical standpoint, it's a lot more complicated. I bet you thought this was just going to be art chat, didn't you? Not a philosophical AI chat.
Well,
I find it quite interesting myself. So
yeah, I do as well, especially because looking at games and tech, I'm trying to look always into the future of where it's heading so that I know what I should be learning. And like, to me right now, it seems like the best thing I can be doing with my time if I'm actually studying computer science is to be looking at AI, and not necessarily. And here's one of the things about AI is that it sounds way more advanced than it actually is. In reality, it's literally just a computer doing probability based on a bunch of results it already has. Like, it's not reassuring. It's not like it's using that to make better decisions going forward, but in reality, it's not. It's essentially they call it neural networks because essentially you're designing a database of information and decisions that the computer can kind of pull from and use probability calculations to figure out the best next move, which is really how we operate. That's how our brains work. Is like we experience life, we accumulate experiences, and we devise lessons from them, and those all add up into our next decisions. So from that perspective, like it looks to me like AI is more of like, we are going to eventually get to a point where we're creating those consciousnesses. Is that the word? How you would say that? Consciousness, or would it be
that's about
it? Whatever. You're going to get to that point eventually, because like I think that's basically how our brains work. And so you just, as we throw more and more computing power at that, and then but then it's a matter of, does the consciousness and like that decision tree, does that actually require having lived that life? Like, I don't know, like the idea of downloading somebody's consciousness actually doesn't make any sense to me in that regard of like how, like I don't know if that data, and that's kind of what people are trying to study and figure out in the, not only in AI, but also in the, like the neuro fields of like studying like how the brain actually stores all that information on there. So like the idea of copying your consciousness on there realistically would maybe it is just a matter of, you know, mapping your exact neuron pattern and everything. But then like once you're in a computer, like is your whole personality and everything going to be warped because it's no longer experiencing life anymore? So then does all that degrade and stuff? Does it not?
You're kind of stunted, aren't you?
Right. Yeah. Or does it not exist correctly anymore, and then it starts warping itself, like the fact that it doesn't have the chemicals coming in to handle the adjustment and moving blood around? Like how does that all affect things? And that maybe once you dump your consciousness in there, you're instantly not you're not human anymore, I guess. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be, but there's a lot of like deep level stuff there that I don't know if it ever can get to the point of being fully conscious without having the human body to go with it, to where you wouldn't need to feel that guilt about putting those little fake consciousnesses through experiments.
Yeah. It's very very dark to think about.
Well, especially if we think about it, the fact that we might be in that situation, like, because if we are, and then are we? I think that was explored in the Matrix sequels, but to hell with those crappy movies. But the idea that we might be like multiple levels deep in simulation like that, of like, then okay, if we're thinking about, you know, I'm talking about maybe making a simulation to try and solve some social problems. What if we are already one of those simulations for somebody else?
Because I think all the people that came up with this whole, you know, we are in a simulation theory, kind of maybe fail to realize that that's the only reference point that we actually have is our existence. We can't imagine, you know, a kind of higher level sort of programming kind of operating, you know, existence than that. So, you know, when we make games, they're based on the existence that we know.
Right.
So, you know, it's people kind of taking that and then shoving it above us instead of below us. And yeah, I don't know.
I think the people that like Elon Musk is one who says he thinks it's very possible. I think it's just looking at the tech, like how I just described it, of like, all right, well, you look at the direction we're heading and the fact that we keep making these, like, it's inevitable we'll get to that point. So then it's like, all right, well, if we will have gotten to that point, who says that we are the last level? We're the lowest level. So yeah, it's definitely, but it like, if you accept that though, then it kind of like, I think it puts you, it's almost one of those things where accepting it is going to force you into nihilism of just like, all right, well then this doesn't matter. Like I can do whatever the hell I want because I'm a simulation.
Exactly. We are having such a philosophical conversation right now.
Yeah. Sometimes you need those.
Yeah, sometimes you do.
All right, well let's take it back to a lighter conversation then. So going back into, I feel like I'm going to keep pulling back into this, but going back into the games in the AAA space.
Yeah.
Have you found yourself, I mean, not only as you're getting into modding and more, and you're getting into more professional game dev level, do you find yourself playing less games?
I actually don't. I kind of made it a habit for myself to not force myself to play, but kind of remind myself to try and play all of the latest games and all kinds of different kinds of games in order to just stay on track and keep on top of, you know, where art is and where games are in general. Because I feel like, you know, if you were to completely stop playing games and only did, you know, the art, then you kind of lose the entire other experience that you get around that art. It's like, sure, this axe looks cool, but what does it sound like when I throw it? You know, what does it mean to the character? And I think with art, it's not just how something looks, it's how it was used. How does it matter to someone? This is, you know, not just in level design and, you know, how you place the objects in a scene to tell the story about how someone, you know, inhabited the space, or, you know, what humans were there, but also the actual objects themselves. And with weapons, that usually just means putting a bunch of fingerprints on it. I didn't mean to understate what I just said, but it's like, yeah, this, you know, you have this object in art, and yeah, how was it used? And you kind of want to contextualize it in in the human space, so that it seems relatable in a sense. Yeah.
So that sounds more like, outside of just playing games for that sake, it sounds like you're talking about even just making sure you have more experiences, games or otherwise, just to keep yourself. Because I mean, I see that happen to myself all the time. If I'll go into like a 2-month binge of like programming with every moment of freedom I have, then it's like I come out and it's like, what happened? Like,
is this real life?
Right. That's probably how I got into that, thinking about the AI that deep, because I'm just like, I'm too in it. I'm too in the shit. I'm not taking enough time to look outside of myself. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. No, I think it's so important as an artist to just kind of experience, life, because that's I think what art is a celebration of life. It's your
even
kind
when
of
it's
voice,
making murderous weapons to kill life.
Good point. Yeah, I think in that context, it's the enjoyment of, because I think maybe an assumption people might make about weapon artists is that we're all gun nuts, which we are, but we're all murderers, or we like shooting things, or I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of truth to that, especially for me. I just find guns, they're a human artifact that so much time and effort has been poured into in order to try and perfect, a machine which carries out a certain purpose. They're just so fascinating to me, and the way they operate is just so satisfying. It's for lack of a better metaphor, a well-oiled machine. But you know what they say, war is the mother of invention.
Sure.
And I just think guns are, sadly, but also inspiringly, one of the most well-trodden, struggling to find the correct words, the sort of the most iterated inventions of all humankind.
What's interesting about what you just said there is that if you think about weapons in real life, we're trying to we obviously are trying to iterate them to perfection. Like obviously there's a whole multi-trillion-dollar industry based around that, of making bigger and bolder and more precise weapons. Is that in games we could create a weapon that you pull the trigger and your target dies, but that wouldn't be any fun.
Yeah.
So we would reject that in our game. So even if it were to exist, and I imagine we'd probably reject. Oh, now we're getting back to philosophy. I say we'd probably reject that in real life too. If somebody put out here's this gun we've invented. If you think about the enemy and pull the trigger, they will die. And it would be like, okay, well that's the perfect gun, and that's freaking terrifying that exists.
It is, yeah.
But we could create that in the games, like in the game engine. We could create such a thing. It'd be like the golden gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Just one
perfect
shot,
weapon.
The perfect weapon. But
it's true.
Because I think your weapons, like you've talked about with the gyroscope stuff, if you almost, that play between its power and its weaknesses, that's where you find the fun in it.
Yeah. Because in testing my guns, I'm rarely ever actually shooting them at anything. I'm kind of just looking at the texture on them and sort of reloading them and firing them at targets in the distance. I don't exactly purposefully spawn things just to shoot them with. But yeah.
But at some point you do, just for the sake of balance, just to figure out.
Of course, yeah.
Just
to see if they're doing enough damage to the enemies.
Enough damage or whatever.
Yeah.
But but that's part of the fun, right? Is finding what's the niche that your weapon fills, and is there enough of a weakness? Otherwise, because I don't think anybody would. I think we've probably all wished it at some point, but then I think if we had it, it would make the game boring. Like imagine if you could take the sniper rifle in Fallout 4 and give it a fully automatic receiver that didn't have any penalty to your sniping ability. That game would become very boring very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that the legendary weapons tend to do that. It's oh, I found the double shot automatic gauze rifle. Well, this is ridiculous.
This kills everything.
Yeah.
I'm done. Game over.
Game over.
Yeah, it's true. It's all a balance kind of thing.
So that's another ability you have to have as a weapon designer. You suddenly have to concern yourself with game balance, which is something that, you know, you wouldn't think artists would be thinking about, but it's very much what you have to do with what you're designing.
Absolutely. I think I saw a weapon on the Nexus the other day. I won't name any names, but yeah, they pulled it out and they looked in the inventory and the damage was something like 289999, and it's like, well, you know, if it kills anything in one shot, it doesn't really damage. It doesn't really matter what the actual damage is.
Right.
I just find that so funny that, yeah, there's absolutely no effort to integrate it into the game whatsoever, into the you know, making it similar to existing weapons or anything at all. They're just like, you know, hit enemy, they die. That's the game. You know, have fun.
I think that's one of the problems I have with a lot of the modern weaponry being brought in. It's like any modern weaponry that's tuned to work like it does, either in real life or like in Call of Duty, is going to be so overpowered in the Fallout universe of its wonky weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. I do gravitate away from all of the tactical stuff. It's certainly very well made, don't get me wrong.
Right.
They're certainly extremely realistic, and yeah, my good friend Haru actually animates a lot of kind of tactical weapons. That's kind of his thing. And I aspire my animations to be like his someday. But yeah, the tactical stuff I kind of gravitate away from. I think in the original Fallouts, though, they did have some quite modern weapons, didn't they? Like the P90.
Yeah, and I think then it was in New Vegas as well with they had the Gunrunners arsenal and brought in a lot more modern weaponry. So yeah, I think there's an argument to bringing it to say it exists in the Fallout universe. I personally I find the charm of the silly weapons, even if they're not practical, like the pipe. I know that's the argument the pipe weapons get, is like this would never work. Like this would explode in your hand and you'd die. But irrelevant. They're fun to look at, and they're like intentionally a little bit wonky, and I think that's important.
For sure.
Because one of the things with like games like Call of Duty and stuff is I have trouble distinguishing like what the difference in power of the weapons are. Like other than you know, maybe this has, you know, this is a faster fire rate or less spread, but the differences become irrelevant in a game like Fallout, where you've got the modification system to where it's like, all right, well, I can just tune all of those to exactly how I want with the appropriate mods on the weapon.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, when you start to introduce all these different kind of variables, that is really the reason that Fallout 4's arsenal was smaller than, say, Fallout 3's, wasn't it? In that some of the weapon classes had sort of been homogenized together,
right?
Due to the modification system. But yeah, it's true, when you introduce certain new factors in it, it can entirely change how the game is played, and or how the game can play out if you choose to. I need to be careful about the gyrojet, that the distance damage isn't too overpowered, because I think I set it at a boost of 2, which is the same as the critical damage. What I didn't factor in is you can fire it automatically, so every single shot can be a crit, and it just kills a death claw, provided you're far away enough, which you should be, really, really fast. So yeah, you need to be very careful about that. I think that's just symptomatic of games in general, isn't it? It's all a balancing act on the programming end.
Yeah, you want it to be just enough of it. You want it to be enough of a challenge, but then you also need to allow the player to feel more powerful over time. It's a pretty complicated dance that you got to play.
It's so hard. Yeah, and you see it in a lot of sort of online MMOs. I think, was it Ultima? All these MMOs which have a sort of ecosystem, with economies and certain animals and things like that, and you set a certain value too high, like, whoops, I made the sheep wool 10 times more valuable than it should be. The players will kill all of the sheep, and then the wolves will be starving, so they'll go and eat all of the players' babies because there's no sheep to eat. Wow, it's got dark again. But that's how the balance. That's just what balance is. Certain things can go really, really wrong, especially in an online environment where everything is sort of fine-tuned. But it's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it? Even in the sort of graphics way, like people might not realize in a game, if you look in a certain direction, everything else is not being rendered behind you because you're not looking at it. So why should it be?
Right.
I think people, when these bugs do pop up nowadays, like you said, it's such a massive break in immersion because we're pushing graphics so far through this, whole smoke and mirrors thing. We're trying to push so far and so hard that when things go wrong, they go spectacularly wrong.
I don't think we're ever going to get away from the smoke and mirrors, because I think, like you just explained with the Ultima thing, I think that is a problem. That's just like a human condition issue, is that once we recognize a pattern or system, that means we also recognize the way to break it.
Right.
And
yeah.
And in a game, there's no real penalty for breaking a system. Like, you're just testing the limits to see if you can. You have to kind of create your own penalty for that, of being like, all right, well, I don't want to ruin my own experience, so I'm not going to do it, which is one of the problems with multiplayer introduces, that there's always going to be a bad actor out there who is going to be like, screw everybody, I'm breaking this, tearing this mother down. But I think that's why games can never, you almost can never get to full systemization, because people are too damn smart and clever, and they'll find a way to break those systems. And that's probably also why the Creation Engine games tend to be buggier, is because they're getting very close to full systemization with a lot of different things.
Yeah, true. Yeah, there'll never be a greater, more dynamic variable than a player in a game, will there? They'll try absolutely everything, completely unpredictable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, why render absolutely everything in a game at the same time? Why compute, NPCs further away than, 5 cells or something?
Right.
There's only a certain distance that they actually get computed. Why do all these things? So,
I think that's one of the reasons why 76 had so many issues coming out of the gate, because they are building on top of an engine that was designed to think about the game world from what's around the player. We run into it all the time with Sim Settlements development, is we're trying to create a simulation that happens at all of the settlements all the time, and there's just like, oh, well, that stuff's not loaded, so all of that data is going to be not accurate right now, so we're going to have to just simulate it. And it's the game engine, then you take the online version, and all of a sudden it has to basically account for all of the enemy activity and all of the loaded objects within 5 cells of every player. So that had to be quite a task for them to sort
I actually can't believe that they pulled it off, because the game came out of nowhere, right? It was Eve 3, and I thought Fallout 4, we're done. Bring on the Elder Scrolls, and maybe I'll mod Fallout 4 a bit longer until it kind of I
think a lot of us expected when we saw the teaser trailer for 76, we were like, oh, it's going to be New Vegas 2, the equivalent of that spin-off game that had
where they use the same assets and
because I think that's becoming pretty standard in the industry for them to do an asset flip game a couple years after the first one comes out. Which is totally understandable. When we were talking about those numbers, the man hours and the dollar cost it must be to produce these things. Doing an asset flip seems pretty sensible. I don't fault them for that. It would be nice. Gopher just did a rant I watched earlier today, which I thought was pretty on point, and it was about the idea that there's too many game companies right now trying to get into the whatever the most popular flavor of the week of games is,
right? Yeah,
which is clearly it feels very much like a money grab, Blizzard with the Diablo 3 mobile, or now BioWare with Anthem, of these companies getting into these games that are totally outside of their field, and at least
zone,
right. I give props to BioWare with Anthem, because they at least created a new IP. So they weren't trying to sell an IP that has an established fan base that are used to a certain type, and then trying to be all right, we're going to take this popular thing and flip it into something else that it doesn't necessarily belong in, and that those fans aren't necessarily after. I think that there's a pretty valid point to that, of that's kind of, it's almost it's almost a little bit of fraud, of you're trying to take this IP, which garnered a lot of respect in this gameplay style, and then you're putting it into another. Well, you're selling, those of us buying it are buying it based on our memories of the previous experience, even though that's almost unrelated. What are your thoughts on that? On all these game companies doing this?
I did watch a bit of that rant, actually. I did sympathize with what he was saying. But there's the other side of the coin, isn't there, where game genres are constantly evolving, and you kind of have to move forwards at least a little with your genres, just to keep it fresh.
Sure.
But there's you've got shareholders to please as well. There's unfortunately the business side. It's not just all, happy creation without any boundaries or anything. You've got, publishers to please and all the other business aspects of it.
And I have no fault against, and personally, I have no fault against the business side of things. Like, I know there seems to be a lot of animosity against money, which I think without getting too philosophical here, since we keep drifting back into that, I think there's a lot of disconnected. People forget that the money represents people's work, and like you have to have work. Your work has to be valuable to society. Otherwise, you're not doing anything. You're just like, then essentially you're just masturbating, and like we can't pay people to do that. Like you have to provide a value, and so like obviously maybe there are companies that take it to extremes, like EA with some of their crazy practices with loot boxes and everything that are taking it to extreme. But they're definitely you do have to satisfy your audience and create a game experience that's worth something to enough people to pay. And like you can't, so the argument of like that everybody should just be creating things for the art doesn't hold water to me. Like there has to be some sort of the business is just an abstraction of the fact that you have to create a value for other people in order for you to do that for a living.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Yeah, it's kind of going into a bit of politics, isn't it? And, try and
dance around that because it's so so hot right now.
All that. But yeah, no, I do agree that the absolute biggest projects obviously have all the money around them, and when you see a massive explosion in popularity in a certain genre like Battlegrounds games a few years ago, then you're going to have certain developers moving towarurs that. I think the most recent is Apex, isn't it? Apex Legends by the.
But that's another one where they took a new. Respawn. I just the one thing I agreed really strongly with that Gopher had said was the idea that they should be creating new IPs if they're going to try and get into new spaces, because to me it's sketchy practice to be like, here's this game or this this franchise you love, we're taking it into a totally different direction, but. A lot of people I don't think see it like that. They're just like, oh, I love that franchise. Like for me, when I saw Fallout 76, no brainer, instant pre-order, because I'm like, it's Fallout. Like I don't care what format it's in. And then in afterward, I was like, okay, well, this is disappointing. I'm not into this. I don't like this genre very much. So waste of money, but and I like and it's something that I won't let myself get burned on again. But it's that I really liked the idea of like. Asking developer or suggesting developers should be creating new IPs if they're going to get into totally different game styles.
Yeah, but again, there's difficulties with that. If you look at the whole movie Hollywood industry, there's some kind of value. I can't conjure it on my head right now. But yeah, a seriously low percentage of movies that are released yearly are actual, new intellectual property. Completely new scripts. A lot of them are reboots or a lot of them are sequels. It's just that the fact of the matter is making completely new stuff is hard, really, really hard. And it takes a lot of creative power and a lot of money in order to make it happen. So it's a massive, massive risk. Right. Risk is the key word. Again, in the whole business space, there's, the managing of risk and, where do we want to make our next move? I think going back to Respawn. I think I'm really happy for them because of Apex's popularity.
Well, and Apex did something clever with it. It's in universe of one of their existing, but they still branded it as its own thing, and that's a clever way around it. If kind of you get the middle of the road there,
it is.
But I would think that on the risk side of things, there's another risk that they seem to ignore, which is the long-term risk of burning out your fan base. And like I think you see this with movies that go into sequel territory. It's very rare that movies that go long form into following up sequel after sequel after sequel actually continue to make money. And eventually it gets to the point where people are like, all right, I'm tired of this. And they stop going and people get tired of the brand and it becomes something you make fun of. As opposed to something that people are happy with in perpetuity. Like, what is it? Fast and the Furious, like, has somehow continued to make crazy money, and they're on like 9 now, which is nuts. And then like prior to that, like there's very rare that there's a franchise that continues to put up numbers. Like James Bond maybe is probably one of the longer running ones that have, you know, made it into that like double-digit sequels. And survived. Of like, you continue to like try and bank off of your brand as a safety play, but you're inevitably, each iteration makes a little bit less, which means there's less people interested in it. So you're almost like you're hurting your own brands to do that. So your safe play maybe isn't so safe in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's another whole kind of creative decision that you need to make about, you know, whether you do continue to use the same creative property and try and do something new. Yeah, going back to God of War, I actually read an article recently where they actually started out with the story, and it was just you know, a man and his son, and you know, Kratos had nothing to do with it. It had nothing to do with God of War. It was just a boy and his father out hunting, and they actually brought in the whole God of War thing later on and actually applied it to that framework later on. But it was still in some ways a reboot because it took place many years later. And I don't know if you played any of the God of War games.
I played all I played up through 3. I don't know how many there were after that, but
I strongly recommend the most recent. It's so good. But yeah, it's basically a kind of a soft reboot where there's all these new characters, you know, Kratos' son and his wife. You have absolutely no idea about who they are or anything, but it's still the same character, and he still carries that kind of emotional weight, the baggage from all the previous games. And yeah, I just think what they did was really clever. And the gameplay is in a completely different way to the original games as well. But they managed to pull it off amazingly well. So that's and I've not heard any real complaints from staunch God of War fans from the older games. So I think that's really an example of how to tread the line really cleverly in terms of, if you want to try out new ideas, how to use, you know, an existing creative property and kind of go somewhere new with it, but also not completely kind of take it in such a massively different direction that the old fans feel disowned. Yeah.
I think that's something, this is something I've discussed with other people about Bethesda. I think that they might have caught on to something smart there, and obviously, and I think God of War is a good example of it, is that when you give a nice break between your sequels and you're not pumping them out annually,
right,
that it actually gives, I think it gives people more of a, what would you say, not an appetite for it, but like they'll give you a little more room to wiggle with. Like it'd be like, you know what, I've been so hungry for another entry to this franchise that I'm pretty open to the idea of some big changes. Whereas
because Ubisoft ran headfirst into that issue, didn't they? With I think it was Unity, Assassin's Creed Unity.
Right.
I forget because there's so many.
They were iterating them out so quickly, and then
like yearly or something.
Yeah, it was annual entries to that franchise. I got burned out after I was a big Assassin's Creed player. I was picking up every entry, and then when Unity came out, it was like, okay, it's time to take a break.
Yeah,
hit the
exactly.
brakes on
I think for me it was a game or two before that, but then they took a break, and then they brought out Origins, and more recently Odyssey. I think, is that the right name?
Yeah, that sounds correct. I haven't played either though, because I was so burned by the iteration and how bad they were getting that I just kind of was like, right, well, you're not burning me again. Like, you've already convinced me you were willing to put out.
I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to skip Origins and actually go straight to Odyssey, because I studied classics in school and I actually really like the old epics, old Greek epics. So I'm going to skip Origins and go to Odyssey. But it's just funny because they're kind of similar games to each other. And yeah, it's like the asset flip thing that you mentioned. Odyssey is kind of the same system as Origins. Okay. Yeah, to get back to the point, that they benefited from that, didn't they? Origins is released to critical acclaim because they took a break, refreshed it, took a new approach, and yeah, it's exactly as you said.
Yeah, I
it's
think
not good to go with the same thing all the time.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it worked. It works great in the sports games. I think everybody agrees that that's totally fine for them to do that, because it's just like, all right, well, you're not changing the rules of basketball. So like, there's only so much, you can only do so much in iteration in each title. Yeah. So at least you can keep, although I would argue that really what sports games should be doing is releasing like just season passes and not, releasing a new version every few years. I think it's absurd that you need to drop $60 on a fresh coat of paint every year, because there's only so. Again,
we improve the rendering a bit.
Right,
they can players.
Right, enjoy. Like the audience is fully rendered now instead of sprites. Like they can do
instead of moving billboards.
Right, exactly. So they can do like little bit of changes here and there, and then like a lot of them, I think, bank on things like their season play and stuff like that, where you have like a longer term investment in your team or whatever. But it's but there's not, they can't, again, you can't reinvent the rules of the core game. Although absolutely. I do remember back in the day, some of my favorite games were the sports games where they introduced wacky things. Like there were like these mutant games you could play, like Mutant League Football. Yeah. Where it's just like you just add some of the gamey elements into the sport, and that was always a lot of fun. And
that's the thing with art, isn't it? Like way back then, when the art was so much more primitive, you could do all these crazy things. I think as well as programming, because the programming must have been, you didn't have to simulate all the beads of sweat on the right. The athlete's forehead, and way back when it was just, okay, this this button dribbles and this button shoots. What else fun can we do? And right. Some devs sit aside on the weekend and crank out some crazy new mode where everyone gets a bigger head the more goals they get, so that they can actually block the goals from going in the goal with their own head, or just something crazy like that. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think sports games are a bit maybe too serious nowadays for their own good. Yeah. But I don't play a lot of sports games, so I can't really speak to them.
I don't play them anymore, but I think it was just looking at them from just looking at the different versions now that come out. And I'm sure anybody who's a huge fan of them would argue like, oh no, they had way more improvements than you think. But it's been so long since got caught up, because I recognized that cycle early enough on that I just wasn't going to get had by it. And then I got had by Assassin's Creed, but
yeah.
Because you only have so much money to invest in gaming every year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many games to play. Jeez, I've only just gone past God of War, and just so many other games are coming out. There's Sekiro next month and everything. I've been trying to do what you said you do of like keeping up with games. I can't do it. I have too many projects going. Like I have multiple Sims Elements things under development. I'm managing multiple other mods. I've got a kid, like a career, like I've got so many things I'm juggling, that gaming was the thing I had to sacrifice, ironically. And so I've just recently started playing Fallout 4 again, for the sake of like, oh, hey, you're developing all these crazy systems. You should go double check that they're still fun within the context of the game you're working on. Just a sanity check.
Right. Just like, I'm going to go double check this. But the PlayStation exclusive titles, I have a stack of them on my that I want to play. God of War is on there.
Awesome.
The new Last of Us, which I don't know if that's out yet or if that's the Last of Us sequel. I never played any of the Nathan Drake series. Like I've just got a stack of those like single player games that are on the exclusives to PlayStation.
I think that's the really want to play nowadays, is that all these games are just so long. God of War included. They're just a lot of the huge developers have gone the kind of massive open world route. And I think when I played Red Dead Redemption 2, it just went on for so long. There were all these kind of stories going on in the middle and all these little side missions and stuff. And when I finished a lot of them, I was like, well, what was the point? Why did I do that? I guess it speaks to my character in some way, but how does it actually factor into the story at large? And the story just went on for so long. I know it's a kind of a way to really get you acquainted with your camp, buddies, your posse, and really get to know their character. But on the other side of the coin, it's just so long. I kind of got a bit disinterested in the story at a certain point before it all picked up again at the end. But the current games releasing today are certainly extremely wide in scope, and which I think is, well, I guess you can sort of choose, someone like you or me who hasn't got the the greatest amount of time in the world, could just sort of blitz through the most important things, can't we? And just sort of follow each story blip as it goes along, and kind of not veer off the beaten path. Whereas other players, like for example school children who spend hours upon hours playing whatever Fortnite, they just have all the time in the world, and they just absolutely get completely immersed in the game for hours on end. Right. And it serves them well as well.
Well, I mean, I think you and I were both with the reason we both mod Bethesda games. Obviously, we were in that trap as well with Bethesda games. Like I used to I would put in 150 hours or more into every character, making sure I did every side quest and looting every single object. And now as I'm playing, I'm like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to I can't be a loot whore anymore. Like I've got to like choose my battles. Like it's like I literally have 2 hours to play today, and that might be all I get for the week. Like I better use that time wisely.
Let's go.
But I think that's cool. That's cool of games that do the open world thing do have a central narrative you can kind of plow through, and they do tend to balance them around that. And that's one of the things that's kind of funny about the balancing in games is that when they have all this filler content and the fact that every game is an RPG, it makes it very easy to like trivialize the gameplay if you're doing all the side stuff. To then like when you come back to the main thing, it's like
this is actually in Witcher 3. There was I got to a certain stage where I did so many of the side quests that I looked back and all of the like level necessary parts were like grey. Like I was level 20 or something, and it was like, this quest is for level 15, so you are too experienced. And I was like, do I do it? And I ended up actually doing it because the writing in Witcher 3 is so good that it's worth going back for these quests. But yeah, it's another challenge, isn't it, in terms of the experience balance, in that you don't want to allow players to sort of get too ahead of the curve, so that when they reach the final story battle, that they're just come clanking in with their massive ancient legendary armor, and they're just like, yeah, what's good? I did absolutely everything else there was to do in this world. Bring it on.
But I appreciate that now, given my limited time, that they actually do that. But it's got to be a challenge, and like, for then a lot of those players then go, like, who do they want to cater to? Do they want to cater to the people that have the minimum amount of time, or do they want to cater to the people that are going to get so obsessed with their franchise that they probably buy everything they put out for it, because they got such a good value out of the thing.
And that comes back to the whole new kind of type of game thing, doesn't it? Like with Apex, you have the new Battlegrounds thing, and that's brought in so many players. Even though the game is quite similar in terms of a gameplay wise to Titanfall, at least with the basic movement and shooting. You kind of have to create a new game and retain that old audience, while also attracting new players to grow your game and validify its existence in the massive ocean of games that there are.
Right. Well, I think today Apex did a bunch of things right with that, and I mean, one of them is they're free to play, so they actually don't need their old audience. Literally, just like anybody can become their audience and no cost to them. But they also, I think, with they did something right that most game companies aren't doing now, which is they launched a near bug-free experience on day one. Like it's become just like a joke now that any online game, and it's been like this since we were kids. Like I remember when online MMOs first started, there'd be rocky launch periods. Like, okay, well, the technology's fresh. People aren't expecting to deal with millions of people connecting to server. Like, we didn't have that capability. It's now been like, I mean, World of Warcraft has got to be, I'm trying to think how old that game has got to be now. Like, what, 20 years old?
I have
almost?
No idea. It's maybe.
Like, I think it came out
2 decades. Even imagine?
Like maybe that's exaggerating, but I think it came out. I'm trying to think of when I started playing it, because I played it when it came out. So I think it came out in 2003, 2004. So it's at least 15 years old. And
2004.
So like it's 15 years old. There are games, and that's not the first MMO. And back then we were just like accepting it, but now it's probably been 30 years since the first MMO came out. maybe a little less than that, and we're still having trouble with launch on servers. It's like, and we now have, like, from a tech guy's perspective, it's ridiculous that you could even claim that that's an issue, because you can roll up dynamic servers now. It's not like you even have to pay. You know, it's like back in the day for something like World of Warcraft, like Blizzard would have had to pre-purchase and configure all of those servers in order to make sure that they had enough capacity, and, like, you know, predicting that is a very expensive thing. Now you don't do that at all. You just rent out server space and you pay for your usage, and you can have it spin up new servers dynamically within seconds. It's crazy how good server technology is. So, like, there's no real excuse for all of these failures that keep happening at launch. And
I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, it's absurd how easy it is to roll up new server tech, especially with like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, like all of those services just make it so much easier. And like I know, I'm sure there's some server techs out there who are screaming like, no, it's way more complicated for games. Sure, but like you're talking these massive studios who have crazy amounts of money. They can invest a little extra to get a good network engineer who could solve those problems.
Sure,
and like Apex did that. They clearly took the time to make sure that they had a proper server infrastructure to handle you know, a crazy number of players, because Titanfall's never been that popular a game compared to some of the other franchises that have had failed launches.
Yeah. Sadly, because it kind of, well, Titanfall 2 at least released in between two other very huge FPSs, Battlefield and COD.
Because I've heard Titanfall 2 is an amazing single-player experience. I haven't played it.
I loved it in single-player. It was brilliant. And the multiplayer was excellent as well. Just the whole Dynamic Titans thing and all the different weird weapons. It's, I think it was as fun as Halo 3 used to be on the Xbox back when I played far too much multiplayer. It literally felt as fun as that to me. It was just so fresh.
That's high praise.
It has all the sort of sandboxy elements are there. You know, you have all kinds of goofy different weapons. There's like an energy LMG where it just gibs people if you hit them with like a handful of the projectiles, but it just spits them out and then overheats and stuff. And there's ordnance-based weapons. There's one called the softball, which is my personal favorite, which is a sticky grenade launcher. And I mean, you can get all the regular, you know, assault rifles and shotguns and all that stuff, but there's also all these, you know, goofy playstyle kind of weapons.
Oh, those were always my favorite, is the wackier, weird weapons. Like when the last multiplayer game I got really into was Destiny, and I would just play with like the weird exotics. Like I didn't want to use the best ones. Like give me the wonky things so I can try and make them work in PvP. And like would just play.
That's the best way to do it.
I would play like the awkward classes, like not the optimal PvP. It's like let's get creative here.
Yeah. And that's what you want to do with the really the exotic weapons, isn't it? The really hard to acquire ones is you want them to change the way people play, not just make them just flat out more powerful.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's just so important I love that when games do that. You get something really hard to attain and then it completely changes the gameplay for you. But yeah, with Titanfall, it's the same thing with the Titans. They have all these different sort of abilities and classes and completely revolutionized it compared to Titanfall 1. But yeah, Titanfall 2 didn't do too well, so I'm just happy for Apex. Yeah, with the bug testing, I think what they did with Apex is they went in with complete random players. So inside the studio, they actually grouped up with that was it. It was the ping system. The reason the ping system is so good is because inside the studio they played with complete, you know, strangers to each other. You know, all inside the company, but they had no idea who they were playing with, and then refined the ping system due to that. So they couldn't talk to each other, they couldn't text chat. All they could use was the ping system, which is how they managed to get it so good.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's just an interesting aspect of that development and that certain feature that it works so well because they simulated that exact game environment that they imagined would happen, because, you know, free to play and you jump in with a bunch of randoms. I played with randoms a few times and yeah, they generally use the ping system, and it's just so useful, a communication system which I hope to see in more games. Yeah.
I haven't played it because I'm first of all, I'm terrible at those sorts of games. As people have seen from my Fallout 4 playthrough, I get my butt kicked by level 1 raiders, so I'm not a great FPS player. But I do appreciate a lot of what they did with that game. Like you can just see they really put the polish on things, and they didn't rely on hype. Like, they literally dropped it one day. They're just like, here's our commercial, here's our game, boom, good luck, enjoy. And I think more game companies should do that for a couple of reasons. Is one, it forces them to have a good game because you're not relying on marketing hype to sell. And I'd like to see more of that. It also eliminates the downside of hype, which is people building up a game to something bigger than it actually is, which is a big problem.
Which is what's happening to the Outer Worlds in a way, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone is, and they're trying to downplay it now, and I think it's too late. I think they already, they used it right in their first commercial of like, from the creators of Fallout and New Vegas. It was like, oh, you just set the standard real high.
They just shot themselves in the foot there, didn't they?
But that's a common problem that I see, and I think that it feels deceptive if the game then doesn't reach those expectations. So then you feel like you're lied to as a consumer, which is bad, especially in this day and age of social media where everybody gets to have their voice put out there.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's for better or for worse. And I think they need to. I think what Apex did there, and Todd Howard started that route. I think he did, didn't he? Fallout 4 was the first game to do the like real quick. Well, I'm sure there have been others, but that was the first major blockbuster game to do that. Of like announce a game and then drop it a couple months later. And like I was hoping that was going to become the new trend of just announce your games and then be like, oh, by the way, you can download it now. Like that's what I would like to see more of. To avoid.
They did that with the mobile game, didn't they? Shelter.
Right, they dropped Shelter that day, and Shelter, like, I had no expectations for it, and I had a great time playing it for a handful of hours, and it was like, this is not the type of game I like generally, but I downloaded it anyway, because, like, why not? It's available right now, it's free.
Yeah, sure.
Give it a go, and I think that's a powerful marketing strategy in itself.
One of the most popular mobile games ever.
Right.
So, yeah, it's true, I do kind of think that it's a really, really good idea to sort of make that decision. The reason they did it for Apex, I actually read this in an article as well, is the reason the director wanted to do that is so that, precisely so that people didn't start a sort of, echo, the term escapes me, a sort of echo chamber, an echo chamber of, criticism before the game comes out. Battlegrounds is kind of a negative term nowadays, and they didn't want people to kind of discuss it for themselves and kind of speculate that, is this Respawn trying to save themselves and, from Titanfall 2's poor launch and everything. They just said, screw all of that, just release it. It's out.
I think it was a great strategy. I think more, and also I think if more companies did it, people would be blown away. Like imagine if Bethesda does that at E3 this year, is just like they show us Starfield and they're like, and it's available now in digital.
Go download it.
Net store. Like, oh man, it would be.
They would be screaming.
People would go nuts. Like even after the terrible press they got with 76, people would just their heads would explode. They could all of a sudden download this game.
Yeah, absolutely, they would. Yeah,
I know I would. See. I would be like, all right, well, I guess I'm taking a break from modding for a few weeks here. Sorry, guys.
But I guess bye. YouTube just shuts down. Your YouTube channel, no uploads. Yeah, I think with on the flip side of that, people might want to plan ahead, I want this game and, I want that game. I didn't pick up Metro Exodus because I know there's a certain game coming out next month and everything. So, I guess that's the flip side of that. But it's all in terms of, how to get people to buy your game, which is, again, coming back to the whole capitalism angle and the whole, is it worth it for society to play?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a real concern now of like, it's such a weird state to be in. And I've talked about this so many times. I think I bring this up with just about everybody isn't it weird that we went from being kids to being able to play pretty much every game that came out to now there's no chance in hell. Like, I can't even play every AAA title, much less every title. Like there are literally hundreds of games released every week. If you count all the indie stuff, it's like, it's just no way anybody can play it all.
I really think we damaged our eyesight in our youth with just the sheer amount of games that we must have played. I do say though that time tends to go by much slower when you're younger, and it speeds up when you're older perceptively, which is another depressing
Yeah, that's
topic.
Unfortunate. Like, I'm constantly battling with I don't have.
That's not to think about.
Yeah, I'm constantly at war with the fact that I don't have. Like, I have unlimited energy to do projects. I love taking on more projects. I just don't have enough time. Like, it's literally like I just couldn't. Like, I physically have no more capability of extending my reach. It's really unfortunate.
Sucks, doesn't it? Let's go philosophical again. If you could, would you upload yourself into a machine, a separate consciousness of yourself, so that you could make Fallout 4 mods forever?
Only if I could guarantee that it wasn't going to corrupt my psyche, like I suggested in earlier. Because I
so
think
like a few years you look back and it's like Sim Settlements, the corrupted version, where literally everyone's running around just tearing everything down and corrupting the save and everything.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be like I do tend to fall on the side of answering yes to would you like live, would you take immortality? Yes, I think I would. But I also could see, they've covered this in movies and books and stuff, the idea of like that sounds great on paper, but in reality, like you then watch everyone you love and everything you know change and die. And it's like, okay, maybe it's not as exciting as I think. So I can only answer from the limited capacity I have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a worrying thought considering that scientists are trying to get there, aren't they? The whole immortal thing.
Yeah. Well, have you watched? Did you watch Altered Carbon or read the book?
I haven't yet. I think a few people have recommended it to me, so I should probably get on it. Amazing.
I absolutely loved it. I think I think it got generally good reviews. So I think most people would agree with that sentiment. I thought it was amazing, but it covers a lot of the philosophical aspects of, and it doesn't cover them like it doesn't beat you over the head with the philosophical side, but you can see the author explored it of the ideas of like what would happen if you had virtual immortality of. In the sake of downloading people's brains to computers, and it like thought about all the things. There'd be people who object to it for religious reasons. There would be people who abuse it in various ways. It's very clever and well thought out. Very cool look into the idea of what would happen in the future if people could download their brains to computers. Definitely,
definitely check it out. Then I do like sci-fi, so yeah, definitely.
Well, I think we kind of went full circle there. So probably a good place to stop before we go down the rabbit hole of philosophy. It didn't
seem like a circle to me. It seemed like a 10-pronged web.
Hey,
where we bounced all over the place.
That's how we get there on this podcast. That's how I like it.
Awesome.
So do you have anything coming out you wanna talk about or anything? Like obviously you just put out that weapon. Fantastic job.
Yeah, thanks.
With the revolver and that's gonna make an appearance in Fallout 4 New Vegas if that mod ever sees the light of day?
It will, yeah, it will, along with the layer.
Fantastic.
Yeah, they'll both make an appearance in that mod.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think just in general, really. Yeah, I announced the gyrojet so long ago, and it's taken so long to create that I'm kind of averse to, announcing things when I'm not sure that they're going to be coming out really, really soon.
Sure.
Which
is, sometimes if you put yourself, you got to put yourself a deadline, and you announce it publicly, and then you're stuck to it. That's how I roll.
And then the hate mail starts rolling in.
To my team's dismay, I like to set the deadlines as my personal whip because it's like we announced it to the world. We're not missing it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's say March.
For the gyrojet. I'm very excited. I love your weapons.
March.
Can't wait to see what you do with it. It gives you a whole month. There you go. We'll see it on the midnight of April 1st. It'll come out, and then it'll turn out that this is an elaborate April Fool's joke by the Rizzler.
Yeah, I bet.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for talking with me, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. Love being on the show. Thanks for talking to me.
All right.
Cool.
Take care, man.
Thanks.